There we
Yeah,
go.
don't forget to record it like someone else did once.
You know, and that was the best webinar. We gave away like $400 of free stuff. We get
Yeah, it was amazing. We shared the secrets of eternal life and immortality, and then it just didn't get recorded. I suppose someday we could do that again, maybe even while we're recording it.
True.
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone is feeling blessed today. Blessed is the key word, the word of the day. All right. How blessed are you feeling, folks? Join us in the chat and say hello. Hello, we love to hear from you. And if you see myself muting and going like this in the background, that's because I have a cough, but no, it is not coronavirus. I was volunteering.
Are you sure?
Well, not 100%. I have not been tested, but sources, yeah, anyways, we won't go there. Although we will segue to that in just a minute, as I want to talk to you, ask you about your latest adventure with coronavirus, but yeah, in just a second. So anyways, last week I was volunteering at a kids camp that my wife and I have been doing for, this was our 8th year now. And I was chasing 2 8-year-old boys around for 8 hours a day, and they're high energy. And by the 3rd day, I was about ready to take a 6-day nap. But I came down with some sort of, I don't know, and my allergies flared up and sinus infection or something. So I'm still recovering from that a little bit, but it was worth it by far. So, and then this weekend I got to go see my oldest son graduate from college down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that was fantastic. So that was kind of a milestone for us. And yeah, so good week. And we're back at it again today. This is the 50th. Now, I think we're probably getting close to our 52nd, our full year doing this diabetes webinar, reversal webinar with Dr. Scott Saunders. So glad that you guys could join us here live. And if you're watching us recorded on YouTube, thanks to Leslie's recording skills here, this will be up a little bit later on our YouTube channel. So welcome everybody. Let's see what we got in the chat here. Patrick, checking in. Hello, sir. Good to have you. And Grace, all right, doing well in California. And Terry and Eve from New Brunswick. Welcome. And New Brunswick, is that, are you guys big bowlers? Isn't Brunswick like a bowling ball or bowling alley or something like that? I don't know. I'm just memories from my childhood. And Curtis, welcome. Good to see everybody. And everybody else that is too shy to share, to say hello and say how you're blessed. So anyways, that's my long-winded segue to say, Dr. Saunders, how are you? Give us an update. What's the latest in your world?
Okay, so I have a long-term care facility. I'm medical director of a long-term care facility. And we have 130 beds, so 124 patients. Every one of them is high risk for COVID-19 because they all have, well, a lot of medical problems. So they have cancer, advanced cancer, some are on hospice, advanced lung disease, COPD, congestive heart failure, and Alzheimer's disease, and anything that the elderly have. So these are like a concentration of a bunch of high-risk people. So we had one, I told you guys before, we had one CNA, nurse assistant, come in with the virus, and she gave it to some of her coworkers, who then passed it around to everybody. And since it took us 5 days to get test results back, they had 5 days of exposure. Everybody was exposed before we go, oh, she's positive, you can't work anymore. Well, you know, it's a long time, it's pretty late. So here's what we ended up with. Out of about 300 people, including 150 staff and 130 residents, we had 56 people positive. And that was 20 staff and 36 residents. And these were all really high-risk residents. And yet we only had, we had 3 die of the COVID-19. One of them was an 85-year-old with chronic congestive heart failure and COPD. Another one was a 93-year-old with heart disease, and the other one's a 96-year-old who was otherwise physically really healthy, but had Alzheimer's disease, so he was mentally not there. Those were the 3 that died. So only 3 deaths, which is kind of our normal for a flu season, even though it's past flu season. So, you know, this is a real virus. It's not a fake virus. It's real. But everybody else did great. And we had a lot of other high-risk people in there, and they had mild symptoms or no symptoms. Some of them had fever for a couple of days up to 100, 101. Not really much. Some of them had a little cough. Most of them didn't know they were sick. They said, why am I here? We had made a COVID unit where they had to go into the unit because they tested positive. And they, why am I here? I'm fine. I'm not sick. Well, sorry, you tested positive. And that was the majority of them. So if you look at our little microcosm of this pandemic, it's very, we did a very good job. We took these really high-risk people, and a lot of them got sick. Everybody was exposed to it. So how do you think we did that? Well, what have I been telling you? Take vitamin D. In March, early March, I sat down with the administrator and the director of nursing, and I said, look, we need to give everybody in here a vitamin D and zinc. And they're already getting vitamin C. So we need to add vitamin D and zinc. The administrator said we can't get that on their insurance and we'll just buy it. So he went on to Amazon.com and bought like bottles and bottles of vitamin D. So since March, every resident in there has been getting vitamin D and zinc. And so many of them got it. Most of them had no symptoms at all. They were completely symptom-free. And there were a few that passed away from the virus and from complications of their illnesses. But there were many who had complicating illnesses like heart disease and diabetes and cancer that did just fine, and they passed through it just fine. So number one, don't be afraid. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It's really, this is a flu. Yeah, you know what? It's a real illness and it's a real flu. But if you take care of yourself, you don't have to worry. You don't have to be overly concerned. I think running in fear is what's going to mess up our world today.
Yeah, thanks for that update. I think it was a week or 2 ago, you had said that there were 35 positive cases, and I think only 1 person got sick at that time, but they had been refusing to take their supplements as well, right? Was that?
Oh, that's interesting. That guy did fine after he started getting his vitamin D, perked up, and he's had no problem since. In fact, he's going to be released from the COVID unit now.
Oh. So is the COVID unit right there at the nursing home? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, we took what used to we called rehab. We took the whole rehab wing and made it into the COVID unit. So anyone who tests positive has to go into that wing. And the staff has to go in there with their, complete suits on, zipped up and all white with all they can see is.
Yeah. So the 3 people that died, that's still 10% though. Like, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at, I guess. Like, that's still a significant amount, people percentage wise, but lower than probably what we're hearing elsewhere. But like, was there any anomalies in their treatment, or did they have like high vitamin D levels? Do you know? Did you check that? Or?
Yeah, the 3 of them got vitamin D. 2 of them went to the hospital, and I don't know what they did in the hospital. One of them stayed, and Leslie was just talking about trying to get hydroxychloroquine. So we tried to get hydroxychloroquine, and the pharmacy refused to give it to us. They said, no way, we can't give it to you, we'll lose our license. And then the family got involved, and they went down to a CVS pharmacy and they said, look, we're going to get this, or there will be repercussions if my dad dies. That guy, they finally got it, but by that time, this is a 96-year-old man whose oxygen is getting down into the 60s. He's really, normal is in the 90s, 80 is low. That's when Medicare says we give you oxygen. In the 60s, that's when you're turning blue. So he was really low. So he didn't make it. 2 days after he started the hydroxychloroquine, he died. Yes. So that was kind of the situation. The other two that got sick, there were two others that got sick. One of them was the one I was telling you about last week. And then there was another one who was really looking peaked. She got hydroxychloroquine. They got it. We got it for them. And the next day they were fine.
Wow. So this is, we'll get to the diabetes part of this webinar, but this is important, relevant, timely stuff here. And I'm very interested in, I've been having conversations with different people. My cousin's wife is a pediatrician in Omaha, and she's, I've been asking her about like hydroxychloroquine specifically. Like, okay, these America's frontline doctors came out, a bunch of these doctors in Washington, D.C., and said, hey, we've been treating hundreds or thousands of people with hydroxychloroquine and I think maybe Z-Pak or zinc or something, and seeing amazing results. And yet they're being censored. Their videos being taken down, accounts being removed and flagged, and all this stuff going on. And like, what's going on? Why can't people, like, why are they not allowed to, why can't you go get hydroxychloroquine anymore, where you could in the past 50, 60 years? And you've talked about how it's safe, and what happened?
Well, what happened is it became political. So as soon as it became political, now the licensing boards are being told by the governor that they can remove a license from somebody who's prescribing it for COVID-19. So then the pharmacist can give it out, but they can lose their license. The doctors can prescribe it, but they can lose their license if the board decides that they want to pursue that. So it's not that everybody's going to lose their license. It's just that, you're at risk. And so a lot of people are going, no. So it's not a medical thing. It's certainly not a science thing. The science behind it, is pretty good around the world for many years. In fact, from 2005, the NIH, when Dr. Fauci was the director of the NIH, they published a study that showed coronavirus was very much inhibited by by chloroquine. At the time they're using chloroquine. So this is way back in 2005. This is 15 years ago. So this is known stuff that it would work for a coronavirus. But as soon as it became political, it's all out the window. I don't understand it. It's just not a medical decision anymore. It's all a political decision.
Well, and I've heard that a vaccine can't get a lot of support or whatever if there's a viable alternative like hydroxychloroquine or something like that. So that might be part of that political part of it. But I've heard that, or my cousin's wife said that there's some studies that showed increased mortality in hospitalized patients, and for hydroxychloroquine, was that, do you know about that study or those studies? And were those like...
Well, I know just a little because I haven't actually read the studies, but the frontline doctors discussed those. And and what I've noticed in medical literature over time is you have to look at who's doing the studies, because studies are set up by whoever's paying for them. And so sometimes studies are set up to fail. So that particular study of more people dying in the hospital from hydroxychloroquine was one of those that's set up to fail, because hydroxychloroquine works best early on in the disease. And if you wait till later, like my patient in the nursing home, the 96-year-old with Alzheimer's disease, who we started hydroxychloroquine, after he'd been for 3 or 4 days, he had been hypoxic already. It doesn't work. So and that's what the study was set up to do, to show, oh, look, it doesn't work. Because they gave it to people who were already in the ICU, already failing, already on ventilators, and it's kind of a late stage.
So it sounds like we're going to have to rely on other things besides hydroxychloroquine at this point, which thankfully.
Well, that's why I've been telling you vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C. You know what? Think about it. With in some states, like 80% up to 80% of the deaths reported in the state are all from nursing homes. And we only had 3. I mean, like, with everybody getting vitamin D and zinc, you know what? We really did a good job.
Yeah. So I've had some questions on vitamin D. You recommend 50,000 IUs per week typically, unless you want to like mega dose for 3 days. You can do 50,000 3 days in a row just to kind of get your vitamin D levels up. And then could you talk about, like, if you are, a child, does that amount change? And do kids even need it? Like, it seems like most kids have pretty high vitamin D levels, but I don't know testing wise and stuff.
Yeah. So vitamin D comes from the sunshine. And if every time you're on the sun, you're putting sunscreen on, wearing hats and clothing, and you're covered up and your skin's not, and the sun's not touching your skin, then you're not going to make vitamin D. So that's where the issue comes in. In that case, yeah, everybody should take vitamin D if you're not out in the sun. But if you're getting sufficient sunshine, you wouldn't need to supplement at all. You have to be careful with that, though, because I told you last week about the beach volleyball player that had low vitamin D. He's like, no way, I'm in the sunshine all day. I don't wear a shirt. Doesn't wear sunscreen, but he was going into the showers right after he worked out and washing all the vitamin D off of his skin. As soon as he made it, he's just all washing it off. So showering every day could be a problem. So for children, about 5,000 units a day is fine. That'll always be plenty, and you'll never overdose on that. That's always good. Yeah. For adults, between 5,000 and 10,000 a day is fine. And then the prescription dose has always been the 50,000 once a week dose. That's the standard physiologic dose. That's if you don't get any sunshine. If you're put in a nursing home, you're laying in bed all the time, you never get out in the sunshine, then you get 50,000 a week. That's what we were giving to everybody.
Okay. That's good stuff. So I think we had a couple questions come in related to this before we transition here. Let's see. I should put my glasses back on.
Before we get into our topic.
Yeah. Okay. Claire asked, how about drinking quinine water? Quinine. I have not heard of that before.
Yeah, quinine water. Quinine is a relative of chloroquine, and you know what? I have heard about it, but I haven't done any research on it to be able to tell you if it's going to be of any use at all. They actually originally used that for malaria, just like they used chloroquine. So it's a possibility, but I can't speak to it because I haven't seen any research on it.
Okay. All right. So this is interesting. Grace, who's been a long time viewer and participant here, she had her vitamin D level checked recently. It was over 100, which is pretty high. So let's see. I've been taking mega doses daily for 5+ years for cancer, like 15,000 units a day. So I'm now removing vitamin D from oral supplements, but glad that I'm good for the virus. So is that anything to be concerned about at that high of a level? Is that a good?
No, not by itself. There's no toxicity of vitamin D. That's a misnomer. There is toxicity. What happens when you get too much vitamin D is you absorb excess calcium. And if you have no place to put that calcium, if you don't have enough vitamin K, for example, your calcium levels can go up. And it's the calcium levels going up that cause any problems with high vitamin D levels. So the high calcium can cause nausea, stomach upset, cramps, and a feeling of malaise. So people can have these issues because their vitamin D level is high, which makes the calcium level go up, but that's because they don't have enough vitamin K to be able to use that calcium and put it into their bones. Their levels go up too high in their blood, and they can't excrete it out in their urine very well. So, but yeah, more is not better. You know, the study, let me show you this. I have this really cool little graphic here. Might be too graphic for some of you.
Warning, graphic content ahead.
If I can find it. Ah, there it is. Okay. So this is something I show my patients. Vitamin D. So if you see the graph, you see how it goes from, this is very low vitamin D, and this is the death rate. So your death rate is 3 times the average death rate if your vitamin D level is about 10. But what she said, her vitamin D was 100, and 100 is way over here. It's way over on this side. So by itself, it's not necessarily bad, but you can see that enough is right in this range, which depending on the type, it's either about 30 nanograms per milliliter. You have to look at the units because different labs will have different tests. One is nanograms per milliliter, and that's 30 is about the optimum level. The other one is nanomoles per liter, in which case about 75 is the optimum level. So you can see that going high isn't necessarily bad, but the optimum level is still right in here. That's the 30 nanograms or 75 millimoles.
I'm gonna share my screen real quick here. Let's see. Where's the graph? Here we go. Okay, can you see that chart? I don't know if you've seen this or not before, but this is showing like the vitamin D concentration in blood and then the death rate percentage. Basically showing that it's 100% death rate if your levels are under 19, and then it gets better all the way down to 34 where it goes to 0. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, this is awesome. So you can see exactly that. This is nanograms per milliliter. And that is, you get to 34 and it's pretty much 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this graph is like wowzers. So that just shows the importance of getting your vitamin D levels above 30 for sure, if not more. But also for testing. So it's good that Grace shared that her, what her tested level was, because I think most of us are probably just guessing and assuming that our vitamin D levels are fine based on how much vitamin D we've been taking. But the best way to do it is to get it tested. And do you want to share real quick on how to get that tested, just to confirm, or do you recommend getting it tested?
Yeah, sure. At some point test it, but I have found that if you're taking over 2,500, 3,000 a day, if you get to 5,000 a day, you're always going to be in the 30s or 40s. Okay. So you're always going to be in a good range.
Yeah. All right. Because the test itself, it's not like a real easy finger, blood glucose test type of thing where you can just get the results right at home. You have to go get it sent to a lab.
Yeah, you have to go to a lab. Yeah.
Which is annoying. But there are more annoying things in this world, like wearing a mask, but that's a whole nother topic. All right. Okay, Leslie, you want to, well, yeah, actually, Leslie, I'm going to hand things over to you because you've just kind of been like a church mouse, quiet in the background here. And
that's me. I'm just quiet.
Yeah, right. Uh-huh. And so what's our topic of the day?
Well, we're halfway into the webinar, so our topic of the day is acid reflux. And this has come up quite a few times from many of you. So we wanted to be sure to address this. We do still want to take your questions concerning type 2 as well. So if you have questions as we go, as Dr. Scott shares with us, please post those in the comments. It took me a minute to get our Facebook live shared, but if you're on Facebook, comment there as well, because we are checking both of those. So you know what? Let's let the expert take it away and share a little bit with us concerning acid reflux.
Okay. Acid reflux is not what we were always told. That your stomach is making a lot of acid, and that's getting up into your esophagus and it's burning your esophagus. And sometimes that's the case, but not always. In fact, they did one study where they found that people who had acid reflux or had the worst acid reflux were the ones that had the lowest stomach acid. And the higher the stomach acid, the less acid reflux that they had. Well, does that mean that low stomach acid causes acid reflux? No, 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 no. You have to distinguish between association and causation. Just because they're associated doesn't mean they're causative. And yes, some people with a lot of acid do get a lot of acid reflux. So what is acid reflux? Well, your stomach is making acid to denature proteins, which means break them up or open them up so that the enzymes can chop them up into little pieces. And if you don't have enough acid, then your proteins don't open up, they don't denature. And so they can go down whole into the small intestine, create a lot of problems like celiac disease and food sensitivities and leaky gut syndrome. So you want your stomach to denature the proteins so that you can chop them up into little pieces, so those little pieces can go down and then get cut up into individual amino acids so they can be absorbed. Well, one of the issues that we have in modern society is we eat 3 meals a day. And we have a worse issue if we listen to nutritionists who tell us we should eat 5 meals a day with snacks in between. So you never have an empty stomach, right? Never have an empty stomach. That's what we're told. Well, if people follow that advice, then what happens is they stop producing stomach acid. And here's the way it works. If I eat, my stomach acid goes way up, and then the food gets out of the stomach, and my stomach empties out, and the pH the pH goes up, the acid drops down really low. And then that resets the system so that I eat again and the acid goes way up again. And then the food gets absorbed, and then the acid drops down again. So I have this kind of waxing and waning, high acid, low acid, low acid all day long, right? Well, if I never have an empty stomach, at what point does my stomach stop producing acid? Never. It's never going to stop. So what happens, it can't reset. So instead of having a lot of acid when I eat, I get a little bit of acid when I eat. And then because I never stop eating, my stomach empties out a little bit and I make a little less. So I have this kind of a pattern, this little bit of acid, little less, little bit, a little less, but it never gets down to zero. It never repairs, it never resets, it never fixes itself. So there's a constant level of acid. The problem is not that the acid is high or low, that's not even the issue. The issue is that constant acid never goes away. So that's the result of following the advice of people who don't understand digestion, who tell you that you should eat 5 small meals a day with snacks in between so you never have an empty stomach. That is bad advice, okay? Because that causes a constant level of acid. And guess what the other repercussion of that is? Some proteins require a lot of acid to digest, to denature. Some proteins require a lot. So typically these are things like wheat protein, which is gliadin or gluten, or milk proteins such as albumin or casein. These proteins require a lot of acid. And if you're just making this much acid, you eat, you can only make this much more, and then it starts emptying out, you make a little less. If that's all the acid you get, then what's happening to those proteins? Well, they're going whole into your small intestine, and they're causing problems like celiac disease and food sensitivities and other stomach problems like leaky gut syndrome. So you don't want whole proteins going into your small intestine. You want the stomach to make a whole bunch of acid so that you can digest those proteins. So guess what? You have acid reflux. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, yep, you got acid reflux there. Look at your thingies that are doing this, and yep, a lot of acid. I can see it in there. So then what do? They give you something to what? Block the acid. They give you an acid blocker. Well, what does that do to your digestion? Now you're way down here, and you go, wow, that fixed my stomach. I no longer have this acid reflux. Well, that's because you don't have any more acid. It's gone. So can you digest your food? Well, to some extent, because some things are easy to digest with the low levels of acid, but there's going to be some foods that you're going to react to just because you don't have enough acid in your stomach. Plus, excuse me, when you're not making acid, you don't digest calcium, magnesium, which are very important minerals for you to get. And you're also not making intrinsic factor that allows you to absorb vitamin B12. So you get deficiencies in that. You don't digest proteins well. You start getting leaky gut and gut problems, including stuff like SIBO, S-I-B-O, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And then, because you're not digesting and absorbing things, it goes into your large intestines and grows bad bacteria in your large intestine. So the whole thing gets messed up. Wow, I painted a really big picture, huh? This is really bad.
Oh, good. It's like a vicious cycle. I mean, everything's feeding off each other. And so when you're saying that, it did kind of make me wonder, can celiac then be healed?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Do and the medical world knows that, or just you?
Oh yeah, no, it's clear. You get somebody off of gluten for about 6 months, and you can do biopsies of their intestines, and they're healed. Yeah, absolutely healed. But the question is, can they ever eat gluten again? And that's where the problem comes in, because now they have a whole bunch of antibodies against this protein. And if there's any time when they don't denature, completely break down this protein in the stomach, and it gets whole into the small intestine, it's going to create a reaction. So some people will react, some people will tolerate it. There was one interesting study in Italy on celiac disease where after they healed the intestines, they gave half of the people with celiac disease regular bread to eat, and they gave the other half sourdough bread to eat. And the people with the sourdough bread didn't get their celiac disease back. And the people with the regular bread did get their celiac disease back. So they said, it must be the yeast in the bread. But I suspect it's really something else. I suspect that the sourdough bread, because it is fermented with acids, I suspect that it's partially breaking down this gluten molecule so that you don't have a reaction to it in your intestines. And I think the regular bread yeast doesn't do that.
Okay, that's interesting. I do hear people talk about how they're finding sourdough is easier for them to digest. So that's interesting. Another question I just had before we dig into some of these other questions too. Why are nutritionists recommending you eating those 5 meals a day with snacks?
Okay. Somebody gets an idea in their head and it makes sense, and then everybody goes, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. Hypoglycemia. So in the beginning of this carbohydrate craze, people started eating a lot of carbohydrates. And they eat a lot of carbohydrates, their blood sugar shoots up, and it causes the insulin to shoot up with it, which brings the sugar way down, and they get hypoglycemia, and they go, I feel horrible. I got a headache. I'm so tired. I'm getting, you know what? I can't even function. I can't think after lunch. So somebody comes up with an idea, and they said, what if, because you're hypoglycemic, what if you had some orange juice or something to bring your blood sugar back up? Then your blood sugar would be up again. And then somebody else goes to the next step and says, well, what you should do is eat frequently so you never have an empty stomach, so you're always absorbing sugar so you never get hypoglycemic. It's a huge problem, and that it causes obesity all over the world, because insulin is the only hormone that allows you to put fat on your body. You can't put fat on your body without insulin. And guess what happens every time you eat? You make more insulin. So what are you doing? Fat, 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 fat. Everybody's going, well, I'm going to eat a low-fat diet. Low-fat diet, that's the worst thing you can do, because now all you're getting is high carbohydrate. You're getting insulin, 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 insulin that's saying more fat, more fat, more fat, more fat. So sometimes people get ideas in their head that make perfect sense. Why don't you just eat constantly so you never get low blood sugar? That made perfect sense to them. But what they didn't understand at that time was the metabolism, insulin, and weight gain and diabetes. And so now people are ending up with diabetes because they're following that advice. Wrong, bad advice. So, and that tells us the same thing then about eating 5 small meals a day for the acid reflux. The answer to acid reflux is resetting your stomach between every meal. And the reset means your stomach has to be empty. And the longer it's empty, the better, the more time it has to reset. So you eat, you make a lot of acid, you digest your meal really well, and then you go with an empty stomach for a little while. So putting 5 hours between meals is a great idea. Having an empty stomach for, 3 to 4 hours, or 2 to 3 hours between meals is a great idea. That actually helps the acid reflux. And then when you have an empty stomach when you go to bed, then you're not making all this acid that can reflux into your stomach, because your empty stomach will shut off the acid production. Now, I have one more thing to say about this, and that is there's a fairly common, it used to be thought to be very uncommon, but it turns out it's a little more common than everybody thought, and it's called histamine intolerance. Some people don't break down histamine. So when they have allergies, it can be allergies to food or pollen, stuff you breathe in, dust mites. It can be any kind of allergies can cause you to release histamine. And if you don't have enough of the enzyme that breaks down histamine, then you have this high histamine level. Well, guess what histamine does? Besides causing a rash and urticaria, itching, and all that other stuff, a runny nose, it also makes more stomach acid. So if you're dealing with allergies, you could be making a whole bunch of stomach acid because you're not breaking down that histamine and getting rid of it quickly. So people take histamine blockers, if you've ever heard of Zantac or Tagamet or Pepcid AC. Those are acid blockers, but the way they block acid is by blocking histamine receptors. That's how they work. So histamine is what's released by allergic reactions. So one of the things that you may have to deal with and may have to look into if you have chronic acid reflux and getting stomach ulcers and high acid causing those excess acid reflux problems, then you may have to look into getting rid of histamine. And there's an enzyme you can take called DAO, diamine oxidase, DAO. And you can get it online. It's easy to buy. You may even find a health food store that has it. It's an enzyme. It's like a digestive enzyme. Our stomachs normally have it. Our intestines normally have it. It's a normal enzyme. And you can actually take this to break down histamine in your intestines and absorb some of it into your body. And then the other thing is you can do a low histamine diet. I have had several people do a low histamine diet and resolve their acid reflux problems and their sleep problems. Guess what else histamine does? It prevents you from sleeping at night. So a lot of people with sleep problems, I had somebody who was on 3 drugs, sleeping medications, drugs, every night, plus taking melatonin just to get to sleep at night. He's able to get off everything and sleep perfectly fine as long as he keeps his histamine levels down.
What are some of the food triggers for that, for histamine? What are some things to avoid?
That's complex, and that okay. You have to go online and look it up.
I've heard of diet, but I'm just curious. Yeah.
A low histamine diet has to include things that aren't fermented, first of all, because fermented things tend to have a lot of histamine. And then there are certain other foods like citrus fruits. Now, citrus fruits don't contain histamine, but they cause the release of histamine from your mast cells. So, so then if you don't break that down, then you have high histamine. And what's really weird is histamine is additive. So if your enzyme works this much and you have this much histamine, it shuts down the enzyme, and then you're adding on top of it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So that you might tolerate like sauerkraut, for example, but if you eat sauerkraut in an orange, now you've gone over and now you have a problem. So it's not a simple thing to say, well, I can never eat sauerkraut or I can never eat oranges. Sometimes it's combinations. So it's a complex issue. I had somebody had to keep a very careful diet record in order to determine what the food triggers and the problems that she was having was. But going through lists of histamine-containing foods and things that release histamine will be very helpful.
Great.
I got a quick question, Dr. Saunders. So we recently launched this brand new product called Reflux Reliever. And could you just take a minute to talk about this product, Reflux Reliever, please?
Yeah, yeah.
What's in it and all that good stuff?
Yes, yes. Okay. So some of the things that prevent stomach acid are simple things like herbs, like, well, tell me what's in it, Joe.
All right, apple cider vinegar, apple pectin,
ACV.
licorice root extract, and honey.
Honey, yeah. Okay, so the licorice root is an herb that allows the stomach to repair the lining of the stomach. Licorice root's very important for allowing acid or preventing acid from damaging the lining of your stomach. And number two, why apple cider vinegar and the honey in it? That's really interesting that you have vinegar and honey. Well, vinegar is an acid, and when you take acid into your stomach, there's a feedback mechanisms that block your own acid production from your stomach, so it stops your stomach from making excess acid. And then the other one is honey. Well, why honey? Well, there's another hormone, cholecystokinin, that decreases stomach acid when you eat carbohydrates, especially something with a taste of sweet. So those are it's a combination of things to help lower the stomach acid and just help you feel better so you can like get to sleep at night. Some people can't sleep because of the acid reflux. So this is just a way to get you through until you can find out what the problem is and fix it.
And the apple pectin, and then also if you want to talk about like the suggested use is to take 3 capsules daily with water on an empty stomach 2 hours before bedtime. So if you could talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. So pectin is a fructooligosaccharides. It's a fiber that we don't digest. It's non-digestible. So what that does is it tells the stomach that there's something there, but there's that it doesn't need to be digested. It doesn't need any acid. So most people don't know this, but there's 2 separate systems in the stomach. If you eat protein, it causes you to make more acid. But if you just eat fruit, for example, like a slice of apple in our original reflux remedy, a simple slice of apple was enough to decrease the stomach acid, because you don't need acid to digest carbohydrates. You only need acid to digest proteins. So these are just add some carbohydrates and some acid to turn on those hormones that lower your stomach acid. And the reason why you want to do that at night is because you don't want to be making this acid at night. You lie down and then the acid comes up into your esophagus and starts burning away your esophagus.
Mm-hmm. So real quick commercial, if you'd like to get Reflux Reliever, it is now on sale at bartonnutrition.com, bartonnutrition.com. And if you use the coupon code, I think it's called Barton25, you'll save 25% off the already reduced price on there. So when you go to bartonnutrition.com, click click on the products. I think it's called product range, and then you'll see Reflux Reliever in the nice purple bottle, and you can get it on sale today. We've got it in stock. And then, apple cider vinegar too. Could you talk about the other health benefits of apple cider vinegar beyond acid reflux? Because it's got multiple uses and benefits.
Well, I can tell you this, that there have been a lot of people who have said that apple cider vinegar can cure everything from cancer to their toenail fungus and bring world peace.
Yes.
But the reality is that apple cider vinegar is helpful for specific things. And if you've ever heard anybody say, oh, if you fix the digestion, then you fix the whole body. That whatever you're going to fix, you have to start with the digestion. And you know what? Apple cider vinegar helps with digestion. It helps you to digest your food, to have sufficient acid, to denature those proteins and cut them up and all of that. And so if you get good nutrition, then you're going to have everything's going to function better. And then if you absorb your food better, then you don't get bad bacteria growing in your intestines, and that works better. So, the system functions better, and apple cider vinegar can be helpful for that.
All right. Well, hey, thank you very much. And I think it's time to do some rapid fire questions that have come in regarding type 2, which is really the main reason that we have this webinar. But today we just went on a couple little important
tangents
here. So, all right.
Stump the doctor.
Leslie, I will let you do some Facebook ones, but first I'm going to rattle some off here quick. And let's see. Okay, acceptable meal time. Is this an acceptable meal time? 9:30 a.m. breakfast, 1:30 lunch, 5:30 dinner, 9:30 snack. Daily carbs divided evenly in each meal.
Okay, absolutely not. Okay, so you don't know about our 610 reset program, do you? Okay. So don't eat anything after 6 o'clock. You want an empty stomach when you go to bed. That's important for acid reflux. It's important for diabetes. It's important for weight loss. It's important for keeping your brain. Your brain won't function well over time. You'll get Alzheimer's disease. Everything you want to avoid happens when you eat dinner after 6 o'clock, or eat a meal or a snack after 6 o'clock. So just avoid all food after 6 o'clock. And so it would be better to shift that down to eat breakfast before 8. That gets your adrenal glands started for your catabolic phase of your metabolism. Eat lunch at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then eat dinner at 5. 2 o'clock in the afternoon at 5. And then don't eat after that until 8 o'clock, 7 or 8 the next morning. Okay. Next.
All right. Well, hey, it wouldn't be a webinar without a good question from Krish. So his question is, why do lean people with normal weight develop type 2 diabetes?
Okay. Some people don't make enough insulin, and that's it. And other people get resistant to insulin for various reasons. I've discussed several times about how stress can cause diabetes all by itself, just because high cortisol levels make you resistant to insulin. And a lot of those people are going to put on weight, but if they're not overeaters, then they're not going to put on weight, and they'll still have diabetes. So there's various possibilities, but yes, you can have normal weight or even underweight and still get type 2 diabetes.
All right. Okay. Vitamin D3, what does D3 mean as opposed to just regular vitamin D?
Okay, well, almost all vitamin D is D3. So there's a D1, which is an inactive form of vitamin D. Then there's the D2, which is the ergocalciferol, which is made by a fungus. And that's the one that you get when you get a prescription from the doctor. You get ergocalciferol, which is only really about 15% as bioactive as vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is the active form of this calciferol molecule. that we use, that human beings use, that all mammals, animals use. You know, even whales in the ocean need vitamin D, and fish, and everybody needs it. It's not, and it always comes from the sun. There's no other way to make it. There's nothing makes vitamin D. It's always made by sunshine.
Awesome. So our Synachroma says vitamin D as cholecalciferol. Was that the?
Yeah, cholecalciferol. That's D3.
D3. Okay.
Yeah. Ergocalciferol is D2.
Okay, so D3 is what you want. All right, so Synachroma, speaking of, contains 5,000 IU of vitamin D. Do we need to add any more vitamin D to our diet besides that if people are taking Synachroma?
No, I showed you the graph. And the graph shows that if you're over 30, and you showed a graph, the one you showed was, you know, if you're over 35, your chances of dying from COVID-19 are pretty close to 0. And that's pretty much what we showed in the nursing home. So yeah, you know, 5,000 a day is fine. That's going to get you over your 35 or 40. That's going to put you in the high enough range that you'll have the optimum level.
All right, excelente. All right, James, how much zinc and vitamin D per day should be taken? So you already talked about vitamin D. How much zinc?
Okay, yeah, a daily amount of zinc around 5,000, up to 10,000 is okay. Zinc is, most of them are around 15 milligrams, 20 milligrams, up to 25 milligrams. That's kind of a standard. We use 220 milligrams in the nursing home once a week. It's just hard for the nurses to be giving out like to every single person because they have to separate them all out. So we decided on weekly doses, and it's probably better to do that anyway, because if you take zinc every single day, you're going to inhibit copper and you might get deficient in copper. So you're better off taking around 200 milligrams once a week. Unless you get sick. When you get sick, take 200 milligrams every day for 3 days.
So the other day I texted you privately and told you about my coughing and all that good stuff, but allergies, and you said quercetin 1,000 milligrams, I think, 3 times a day, which I've been taking, but it was interesting. I read on there, I think it's called a zinc ionosphere or something like that, or spore, where it basically, quercetin helps you to absorb zinc, I believe. Is that correct? Could you talk about that a little bit? I'm personally interested.
Correct. That's interesting. So vitamin C is very important, in fact, essential if you want to absorb iron. You don't absorb iron without vitamin C. Quercetin is a bioflavonoid related to vitamin C, and it's something that helps the body to absorb zinc. It's not that you have to take a whole bunch of zinc. Quercetin can actually be really helpful in that. And if you take extra iron, that will help you absorb iron. But if you take it with vitamin C, it'll work a lot better. So that kind of thing, yes. Quercetin is really good for that. It's a bioflavonoid. It's found in orange peels, and it's in apples, some fruits.
Red onions, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. Yeah, I don't think I've ever taken quercetin before, but I'm hoping that it will help me keep my allergies at bay. So usually they're fine, but when I'm outside for 3 days in a row and running around, like, I can get worn out. So, all right, good stuff. Question from this person named Anonymous Attendee. Is sourdough bread too much carbohydrates for a diabetic?
Good question. Yes or no, and either one is possible. Generally, bread is something you would mostly avoid, but if you have a little bit here and there, it may not be an issue. So that's where we get into our diabetes recovery program. If you want to do the diabetes reversal program, then you start with phase 1. In phase 1 in the diabetes solution kit, you take all the bread out, because every slice of bread is going to have like 20 grams of carbohydrates. That's your full day's supply right there in our phase 1 program. So then you take it out completely until your blood sugars are always or consistently normal. And then if you're in the United States, it's going to be between 70 and 90. If you're in Canada or Europe, it's going to be 4 to 5. When you're consistently in that range, then you start adding things in, like you may add nuts and seeds, and you might add bread, and you might find that certain types of bread make your blood sugar shoot up, whereas other types of bread you're fine with. So yeah, I generally recommend sourdough bread. I make a whole grain sourdough bread at home. I make it myself, not all the time, but I love it.
And a fun little fact, I have been working on our recipes. As some of you guys know, we're redoing our recipes, and we even created a meal plan. There is an extra option if you are really needing some bread. It's a rosemary bread. It only has 4.7 grams of carbs. And so that'll be included in the recipe. So if you've never purchased the diabetes solution kit, now's a great time to do it, because you're going to get those recipes that are low carb. And the meal plans include 3 meals a day that only equal 20 or under grams of carbs. So just a fun little fact. I've been diving into those recipes, and there's some really good ones in there. So also, when those are done, we mentioned this on the last webinar too, we will send you a link so that you can download those for free if you've already purchased our meal plans or purchased our solution kits. So
yeah,
looking forward to that.
Really good recipes in there. So that's been a fun little side project that we're getting real close to being done. So Terry and Eve sent me a personal question, and I replied on the chat with my personal email address. Just wanted to make sure you saw that. Shoot me an email. I'm going to help you out there. Question about Synachroma. So yes, Synachroma is still out of stock in our, we sold out a few weeks ago, and we had an order placed in April, and it's still not delivered because all manufacturers right now are having all sorts of problems getting stuff in stock. And most recently they've run out of the capsules themselves. And so, but we just heard that we should be getting it put together this week, hopefully, and back in stock, hopefully end of next week. But we've continued to get delays. And so Synachroma and a lot of our other supplements, well, the other supplements are okay, but Synachroma right now is unfortunately, yeah, out of stock. So, and that's our
Everybody
best
wants it.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a good problem and a bad problem at the same time. But I do have some personally that I want to send to you, Terry and Eve, because I know you guys have been waiting patiently, and we'll get it sent across the border here for you. So let's see, what else? Leslie, did you see any questions come in on Facebook?
Yes, but I think we already addressed it actually.
Okay.
Yep, we're good.
All right. Well, Dr. Saunders, always like to give you the closing words and any final things you'd like to say here before we wrap up.
Just what we began with. There is nothing to fear but fear itself. Roosevelt said those words, and that was during a time when the world was going into war. I think that we should be in the same situation and not be afraid, and just move forward with faith and keep going, because it's going to get brighter. It always does.
Amen. That's right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Saunders, and thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everybody that's joined us today. And, like he said, keep the faith. Don't give in to fear. There's a lot of fear that's been being promoted from every angle in the media. Do what you can to unplug from the media, because they are trying to sell you a bill of goods that is written in the blood of fear, I guess you could say. And fear is never a good place to be in. So stay in faith, stay in love, stay in community with others, and get outside, get some sunshine while you can. It's August, it's beautiful outside, hopefully where you're at, and continue to eat healthy. Enjoy cooking, like experiment with some of these new foods that you might be trying, and yeah, just good stuff. So we'll be back here next Tuesday at noon Central with answering your questions, and who knows what next week's topic will be, but it'll be good as always. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. God bless. Take care. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.